Hey everybody, welcome back to Bleeding Cool's weekly recap of The Walking Dead Season 8. This afternoon we're going to be taking a look at Episode 4, Some Guy. My name is Ray Flook. I work the television beat for Bleeding Cool. Welcome to what I think is my first standing edition. I told you we're going to be constantly changing and evolving this. Hopefully we're going to be working on a little bit of webcam in another week or so. But the sound's gotten better, a little bit more ability, which I think kind of should lend itself to the recap. So, now that I'm done giving you guys some housekeeping stuff, let's get right to the recap. First thing I want to tell you about the episode is, surprisingly, when I was doing the live blog, it seemed like there was so much going on, and there was. But I didn't realize until looking back, there weren't a lot of players in play this episode. It was essentially Ezekiel, Carol, and then Rick and Daryl later on. But it just seemed like there was so much, mostly because there was. I think that's a lot of credit for the writers. I think that's a credit for the actors and giving each of those scenes a sense of urgency. And the fact that it comes at the tail end of what Nicotero and Scott Gimple were saying, and I know I've been saying this all along, but really, episodes 2, 3, and 4, compacted, make for their own action movie. I'd be interested to see what it would look like to take those episodes and edit them together into one like mini movie arch episode. I think it'd be really interesting. But let's get started on the recap. First, let me say this episode is Emmy nomination material for Kerry Payton. King Ezekiel, this is just his episode. It is heartbreaking, it is heart-wrenching, and yet still uplifting and hopeful at the same time. We start the episode by seeing a flashback to when Ezekiel was gathering Carol and the troops from the kingdom to lead them out, clearly before what we saw happened at the end of the previous episode. And it's a beautiful moment where we see Ezekiel again rallying the troops, and he says these amazing things to them and talks about, and we understand now why he keeps emphasizing smiling to Carol. It's the "and yet I smile," where he just tells him, look, I get it, I understand all the hardship, all the heartbreak, all the losses we've been through, but to get to that better place, you smile. Yeah, as tough as it is, you smile. As rough as it is, you smile. And it's that kind of optimism, but I think much more realistic optimism than it may sound, I think, is the reason why so many of the people kingdom look to Ezekiel as king. What we unfortunately get at this point is we get a flashback to the now, and we see what happened at the end of the previous episode. Ezekiel was saved under a pile of bodies of a number of his knights, and we see him digging his way out, but he has messed up his leg majorly, and we get a lot of painfully tense scenes where it just looks like he's just gonna get it. He's trying to find a gun, bullets are out. Eventually he uses a gun as a crutch. So there are just so many tense moments where it's just like, oh, what the hell's gonna happen? And just when you think things aren't gonna get any worse, some twerpy savior white guy comes rolling up who looks like a cross between Norman Bates and every serial killer from the 1970s. He just, again, you hate him from the first moment you see him, and throughout the episode, you elevate this little punk well above Negan at this point, because this little twerp is just all out for himself, and the stuff he does to Ezekiel and both the verbal and physical pain he inflicts upon him, it's nice to see where this goes, and again, we'll be talking about that in a second. But let's go to Carol, because we said Carol was another major player in this. Carol is in now full stealth Carol mode. She is like, okay, I'm getting into this facility. They clearly have some humongous cannon up there, and we need to get our hands on it. So we see Carol going into Jason Bourne mode, taking out saviors, but the numbers game starts to be a bit much. She ends up out in a courtyard area with a very, very nasty standoff. And I said this during the live blog, and I'll say it again. This whole situation could have been changed dramatically with a grenade. Either to take care of the saviors that were there, or worst case scenario, and my belief is, if you're not going to get the big gun, don't let them have the big gun. Blow that shit up to smithereens. You know, that again, take that third option. And I'm thinking, wow, this scene would have been so dramatically different. Just one grenade. We get back to King Ezekiel and the twerpy guy. Twerpy guy is just now just dressing down Ezekiel about not being big. He's a joke to his people. All of this nonsense he told him about kingdoms and knights and everything has just led to his people dying. It doesn't help that essentially that's what's around him. And what's getting ready to attack them is essentially Walker versions of his own faithful people. This little Torby guy is just essentially using and abusing Ezekiel, and it gets to the point where he's just ready to kind of off Ezekiel. And at that last goddamn second, who do we see? But goddamn, Jerry rolls up, basically enters the scene with a battle axe that just cuts the situation right in half. Like Alexander the Great doing the Gordian knot just kind of took care of that situation with one big swack. I have never cheered that much since getting annoyed at a Friday the 13th movie, seeing somebody put an axe through somebody else. I have to say that was just an amazing moment. Cooper Andrews, I want to make sure I get his name right. Another guy, needs to get a lot of work. Just really good charm and good personality, and just the way he interacts with Ezekiel is just fantastic. There's a great moment where Jerry and Ezekiel are together, and they're fighting off walkers, and they're trying to make their way, and Ezekiel's trying to tell him, you don't have to call me king. And initially Ezekiel says, yeah, I do. No, trust me, yes, I do. And then later on, when he says that he thanks Ezekiel and explains why he calls him king, essentially because he's a cool dude. And, that may seem, it's funny in the moment. It may seem kind of funny in a throwaway line. But in this world, at this time, to have somebody who thinks and acts like Ezekiel does makes a world of difference. Somebody you can give your faith in. People who, again, didn't go into this naively, who knew the potential for loss. Still doesn't mean it doesn't wear on their king. But again, it's something they were aware of and went into battle with him willingly. We go back to Carol now. We get to a situation where we see Carol is in the courtyard. She sees that she essentially has a choice to make. She can either go after the Saviors, who are currently in the courtyard, or she can go and save Jerry and Ezekiel. That is where we go to a commercial break, of course, because they love doing the cliffhangers. And when we come back, what we get is we get a flashback to, again, a conversation between Carol and Ezekiel before, obviously, they had left on this mission. And the conversation was essentially about Ezekiel's fighting experience, and is he ready to do what needs to be done. And it's a great conversation. Especially because we get to learn what the relationship between King Ezekiel and his trusted right-hand tiger Shiva. And we see, though it's the classic story of aiding a tiger in pain and the bond that gets developed, there's still something very touching and sweet about the moment. And there's a great line that I really want to emphasize because I think it really fits for a lot of the characters up to this point. If you're asked to be the hero, be the hero. And that's what Ezekiel chose to do. He chose to in that moment. He could have gone off. He could have become a savior. He could have gone in all many different directions. He instead chose to inspire these people and to lead these people to the potential for something better. And it's truly amazing. And Carol sees that in him, that it's not just naivete. It's an understanding that at some point we've got to get to a better place. Even if it's ugly now, we've got to get to a better place. Moving along, we see that Carol saves Ezekiel and Jerry, but unfortunately that involves the guns getting away, which is not good, which means the Saviors have won the day. There's nothing they can do. Carol is looking all just lost and depressed, and then all of a sudden, and you see that look on Carol's face go from to, because she realizes now it's time for the Rick and Daryl show. And that sound means that's Daryl on a motorcycle, which means, as she puts it so eloquently, they're not getting them to the sanctuary. And we cut to a really, really great scene where it's Daryl and Rick essentially on the chase to get their hands on those guns. And there's a great fake, because there's a moment where we see Daryl, after this guy in the back of the truck, one of the Savior truck, starts shooting at them. We see Daryl skid off to the side. So we're thinking, oh, shit. Daryl's out of the picture. Now it's up to Rick, and Rick's in a big truck, which is a big target, so, like, how long is this going to last? So you see some maneuvering and everything like that, and you see some cool stuff going on, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, we see Rick behind the truck. The guy's ready to shoot at Rick. Rick does this quick side move, and then all of a sudden, you got Daryl just bam, 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 takes out the gunner in the back, which means now it's just Driver and Rick. And for those of you who've seen the show before, which I'm assuming you have, you pretty much know that that's not much of a competition. Rick rolls up. Rick gets into the truck. Rick basically stabs the driver. Now, the only thing that sucks is the truck kind of goes off to the side. So it's like, oh, okay, well, Rick's going to have to take a little bit of damage for this. But they get the guns. That's the most important thing, that those guns never make it back to the Saviors. They never make it back to be used against them. And a huge, huge victory. We then cut to the woods. And we see now, we've got Carol, we've got Jerry, we've got Ezekiel, and they're making their way through the woods, and they're going through a toxic area in the woods, and they're realizing that they're slowing down more and more. And then when things look the most hopeless, as they're trying to get Ezekiel across a little creek bed area, Shiva returns to save the day. to sacrifice herself essentially for her king and for her people. And it is rough, and it is tragic, and it is harsh. And you know, like Robert Kirkman said in Talking Dead, it tells you something when you can feel for a tiger that was 95% of the time CGI created. But again, I think it adds validity to the idea that this is all out war, that there will be casualties, they will be rough, and casualties aren't just death. We're seeing changes in our characters too. But again, that's where we left off. Very rough, tragic ending. You know, there was a victory, but in that victory there was a loss. We see King Ezekiel back at the kingdom, not even being able to speak to his people, just walking away. So we're left to wonder where he'll be in all this. And in typical Walking Dead fashion, we're probably going to have to wait a couple weeks before we get that, because tonight's episode, The Big Scary You, takes us back in time to show us how things have been going from the Savior's perspective. We're going to get finally to see the conversation and confrontation between Negan and Gabriel. Clearly, we've seen from the previews that there's definitely going to be some Dwight action and some Eugene action. I'm very curious to see what happened where all of a sudden it seemed like at the end there, Dwight's map and plans didn't seem to be as accurate. I'm very curious to see where things went wrong, and I'm hoping that doesn't bode poorly for Dwight. But again, thank you guys for joining me for this recap. Please make sure you join me tonight for the Walking Dead live blog. We're going to be starting it unofficially pregame at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with some cool stuff we'll be posting, but at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have us on in the background while you have the show. Take a look, see if you like what I'm talking about. You disagree with anything or anything you would add, please make sure you do. Love your comments. Please make sure you're sending them. Comment below here. Send me stuff through social media. Really appreciate it too. But thank you guys for joining me, and hopefully you guys will be joining me tonight. Take care.